Hey everyone! We are living in the 21st century and honestly it feels pretty damn good. For example, I have an opportunity to get a microphone and to record a video right now. I don't know about you, but as for me, I wouldn't want to live in any other time. Thanks to science, we've been able to beat missiles, which killed several hundred million people in the 20th century. And right now, we can swim underwater like fish, we can fly into the air like birds, we can send people to the space, and we can get fantastic images from stuff like James Webb. Just look at this. All these things that I've mentioned and lots of other issues are possible only because of science. Science as a way to understand the world and science as a social institution. Thank you, science. There are different types of worldview, including religious worldview, mythological, philosophical, and even everyday worldview, but it's exactly science helps us to process the information that we get from the world and from empirical understanding into the most effective and productive way. But what is science? To my mind, science has three main elements. Let's check it out. Element number one. The world around us is pretty understandable. We can get information from the world and we can process it. So ideas like solipsism and the idea that we all live in the matrix, or for example, philosophical mind experiment like the brains in the barrel, they are all non-compatible with science, to my mind. And frankly speaking, they are absolutely nonsense. The second element that I should mention, which explains how science works, sounds like this. Our understanding of reality should change in line with the reality itself. And this is, for example, absolutely impossible for religion, because dogmas are absolutely straight. They are totally unreviewable. And if you don't agree with them, you are just a heretic. In science, we happily don't have heretics, but sometimes there is a problem of science, or we can mark some people that we don't agree with, we can mark them as pseudoscientists, and we know some examples in the history of science when true scientists were supposed to be pseudoscientists. They were stigmatized and even imprisoned. And one of these examples is, of course, Soviet Union and genetics in this country. It was 30s and 40s of 20th century in the Soviet Union and even 50s when Stalin and other Soviet leaders, ruling by, of course, Marxism ideology, claimed genetics to be a pseudoscience. And, of course, it was a mistake. But does it mean that we have a problem with science? Maybe it's a problem with Marxism? But the main thing that we must get about science, to my mind, is that science has its internal correction mechanism. If an idea doesn't work, it's gonna be revised. It's the most important thing that I get about science. There are tons of examples, but my favorite one is, of course, a peeled-down man. In 1912, an amateur anthropologist, Charles Dawson, claimed to find a skull. And he claimed that this skull was of a Pleistocene man. And this discovery was met with a great enthusiasm. However, 10 years later, it was discovered that that skull doesn't have any mutual thing with a Pleistocene, and actually Charles Dawson in this aspect was a fraud. So science and scientists are supposed to get the truth. And if facts are comfortable for us and for our theory or for our hypothesis, but it's not true, we need to drop these facts and we need to go and find the real facts, because the main criteria of scientific knowledge is objectivity. Science tends to be objective. And now please think about it. Can you give an example when the consensus in religion, magic, astrology or some esoteric stuff changes because of facts? As a religious studies scholar, I can say that I don't know such examples in exactly religion. And if you have a chance, just try to persuade, for example, a young Earth creationist or maybe a flat Earth theory advocate that they are wrong about these theories or concepts. And spoiler, Bill Nye did not get successful in this. So the key difference between science and not science, in my personal understanding, which based on philosophy, maybe philosophy of science, is that scientific method has an ability to change approaches, and it's not being stuck on facts which are very comfortable for us, but they're not compatible with reality. Undoubtable, science is really good for us all. And like Steven Pinker wrote in Enlightenment Now, we now live in a better world than we lived yesterday. And everything because of science. Nevertheless, nowadays we have a strictly negative approach to science among some groups of public intellectuals. For example, leftists or in opposite right-wing conservatives and, for example, postmodern philosophers. There are tons of public intellectuals who hate science itself. And it's an odd thing, you can say. And now I'll take a few statements that critics of science use. These statements are questioning the value of science itself. And I'll take a try to analyze these statements and maybe to critique them. The first point sounds like the first point is: science is responsible for sexism, racism, or other examples of xenophobia. But the ideas of persons like Galbino or Adolf Hitler, whom we condemn, of course, they are absolutely irrational, they are absolutely non-scientific. In the other words, there are nothing scientific about scientific racism. Scientific racism or scientific sexism or scientific xenophobia, it's a form of ideology based on completely pseudo-scientific approaches. And books like, for example, Is Science Racist? By Jonathan Marks is just a postmodern attack on science. Of course, an exact scientist can have absolutely ridiculous and stupid and even cannibalistic worldview, but it's his own problem. It's not a problem with science itself. And it's pretty weird for me that some of leftists' ideology orientation postmodern philosophers claim that there's a right-wing conspiracy of racist scientists. I think it's conspiracy at all. Yes, really. Our channel is politically neutral, so the next claim, which is pretty weird too, sounds like there is a conspiracy of leftists in science. They're right-wing conservatives, who, of course, provide sometimes pseudo-scientific views. And, for example, these people can deny global climate change, and they can deny a value of vaccination, for example, or they can deny value of social science at all, or social studies at all, because there are leftists who rule the world. And frankly, I don't know, is it conspiracy or not, because I don't live in the USA and I don't live in Canada, for example. I'm not a part of academic community of these countries. So if you are, please write me a comment and I'll check it out. But the denial of proved scientific facts is widely spread among radical leftists and radical right-wing ideologists. Ideology has nothing to do with science. Ideology and science, I think they are incompatible at all, because ideology is based on some subjective stuff, subjective worldviews, or maybe subjective interests of some groups, whether science is based on objectivity. So we must say that these first two claims are both ideology-based attacks on science. The first one from the left side, the second one is from the right wing. And I think that we must protect science from ideology. It's extremely important for us. And I'm happy because of the situation with Steven Pinker, who was accused of racism, and some ideologists tried to cancel Steven Pinker. But this attempt wasn't successful at all, and I'm super glad about this. I think it's time for radical critics of science to take off their glasses, to throw away their iPhones and maybe Androids. Stop using planes, please. Planes and trains, it's all about science. Just take on the backpack and start walking around the world, just like Jean Valjean from a novel by Victor Hugo. I think that these conditions are absolutely necessary for every critic of science. The next point of view, which criticizes science itself, sounds like this. Science is not better than astrology or tarot cards maybe, or esoteric stuff at all.
I'm a astrophysicist.
Okay, I'm a Gemini.
Science is not the best form of worldview. Science is just one of them. And the most famous representative of this position is, of course, well-known postmodern philosopher Paul Feyerabend and his well-known book Against Method. And nowadays there are tons of followers of Paul Feyerabend, and it's astonishing for me, honestly. How should we respond to this thesis? I think the answer is very simple. Science works, and tarot, astrology, and esoteric magic, it's a kind of magic, and religion in this aspect in understanding and explaining the world. All these kinds of worldview don't work at all. You can prove efficiency of science using just simple rational methods. And if you refuse to use these methods, or if you deny these methods, you can do everything you want. You can call yourself Napoleon, and you can say that Jack Lisowski one day will gonna win the World Snooker Championship. So, in explaining the material world, how it works, science is the best form of worldview. It's been proven to work in medicine, in physics, in astrophysics, in biology, and in fact, in social sciences too. In social studies too. But here, unfortunately, we have a conflict among scientists, because some physics or biologists, they don't respect social studies at all. They can say that it's subjective, it's maybe judgmental to some things just because of its ideological explanation, and so on. But as a social studies scholar, I think that, of course, it's science. And if you're interested in this topic, maybe I'll produce another video on this theme. And if the postmodern philosopher claims that science doesn't work, or science is not the best worldview mechanism for understanding the realm of materia, you need to calm down, you need to get out of this philosopher. It's absolutely impossible to persuade such postmodern philosopher. Another claim about science is that science is authoritarian mechanism that does not allow free thinking, which blocks every type of free thinking. Instead of this thesis, science is really, really free. It's a realm of thought when everything is possible. Who would have thought that Albert Einstein is absolutely right when he, for the first time, came up with his concept? Who would have thought that Alfred Wegener was right when he claimed that, when he said that once all continents were the entire entity? It sounded like completely nonsense, but it became true. That's why I say that science is the freest, if it's possible to say like this in English, of course, realm of thought. There are plenty of examples of scientists who faced ridicule, who faced oppression and opposition to their ideas, but later they proved that they were right. Science is a realm of freedom, but of course, actually, science has its own rules and laws of science. You cannot go to a scientific conference and use astrological type of argumentation. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's impossible, of course. In that sense, definitely science is an authoritarian mechanism. Of course, yes, it is, but only in that exact sense. Of course, we should consider different point of views, but we don't have to take young Earth creationism or flat Earth theory or anti-vaccination, for example, or some other pseudoscientists' claims seriously. We don't have to do it. Why? Of course, science has different problems, and quite serious problems. Firstly, of course, it's a crisis of reproducibility. I think that's a terrible trouble for contemporary knowledge, for contemporary science. Psychological experiments and, for example, behavior economics by Dan Ariely, who I respect, and he's a great scientist and a great lecturer and great popularizer of science. Of course, we have a crisis of reproducibility of these scientific papers. Also, there's a problem of a huge amount of garbage scientific publications. It's a real trouble. But that doesn't mean that science as a way to gain knowledge and science as a social institution has lost its value. It's absolutely ridiculous way of logic, way of explanation. It doesn't mean that we have to give up with science and continue with religion, mythology, or esoteric maybe. Science is definitely the main tool that we should use to understand the world around us. Science works, and it's clear looking for results of this work. I think we must consider that attacks on science are not productive, and these attacks have nothing to do with reality. Guys, this is my first video in English, so don't judge me too hard, please. And if you enjoyed this video, please support it by liking or commenting or maybe subscription to my channel. My name is Nikita Obraztsov. I'm a scholar of religious studies. Bye-bye. Thank you.